I don't know if you can hear in the back, but if not, we'll raise the microphone. Thank you all for being here today at the Brotherhood Synagogue. My name is Herbert Block. I'm the Executive Director of the American Zionist Movement. And I'll introduce the program also with a point of personal privilege that I grew up in this synagogue, in this building. My late father, Rabbi Irving J. Block, Zechrono Livracha, was the founder and the rabbi of the Brotherhood Synagogue. And we're always happy to have programs here, bringing together a wide aspect of the Jewish community in a synagogue whose name is Brotherhood, and hope to have that spirit in our conversations here today. My father would also be happy to have a program on Zionism here. He went in 1947 to Israel in Machal and was there dancing outside the Sochnut on Kaftep in November when the partition vote was announced, and would be happy that this program is being held here to bring together many aspects of the community. I want to acknowledge a couple of people before we get started. We have a number of members of the AZM board from our 33 national organizations. You can see the members of the board of the organizations on the back of the program, and we have here from our board Salomon Vaz Diaz, Judy Sherrick, who's a leader of Hadassah, Michael Lawfare, Ken Bob, who's one of our speakers, also on our board. And if I missed anyone from the board, I apologize. We have some representatives here from Israel, from the World Zionist Organization, in addition to Yaakov Hagoel, who's the vice chairman. We have Moshe Preisler, who's the chief of staff to the chairman of the WZO, Avram Duvdevani, who's visiting in New York, and Simcha Leibovich, Dr. Simcha Leibovich, who lives in the neighborhood, who's the representative of to North America of the WZO executive. So we're happy that you're here at the Brotherhood Synagogue. When I was thinking about this program, I remembered a line from my late father from his book. 20 years ago, he wrote a book, A Rabbi in His Dream. I think there's like 3 copies left on Amazon. It was before Amazon. But given his and my father ended his life, he's buried on Har Zaytim, so he was a lifelong Zionist from a household in Hadassah in Bridgeport, Connecticut, to Machal, to being buried on Har Zaytim. And he always spoke about Israel and Zionism on Rosh Hashanah. And he quotes one of the lines in his book where he was asked, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitic? And he responded, not necessarily, but almost always, which I thought was an appropriate line even 20 years later and very relevant for the conversation today. So I'm going to turn the program over to Dr. Francine Stein, who's from Amit, but is the national board chair of AZM. Before that, I just want to mention you'll be hearing a lot from us, from our organizations, as we are here together with the World Zionist Organization as the Zionist Federation in America that's part of the WZO. We also administer the U.S. election for the World Zionist Congress. Next year, a little under a year, will be the 38th World Zionist Congress, continuing in the tradition that Theodor Herzl began of global Jewish gatherings, the global parliament of the Jewish people, as some call it, which began in 1897, and the 38th iteration will gather in from Jews and Zionists from around the world in October 2020 in Israel. There'll be an American election to where you can vote for your representatives to the World Zionist Congress. There's information on the AZM website. Since you've been here, we'll send you information as well. And that's a way that starting in January 21st to March 11th, that everybody can personally engage in Zionist discussions, express your views and support groups of delegates to represent America at the World Zionist Congress. So thank you for being here at the Brotherhood Synagogue with AZM and the World Zionist Organization. Now I'll introduce Dr. Francine Stein, the board chair of AZM.
Welcome, everybody. AZM is pleased to co-sponsor this program with our WZO partner. But before we begin, I'd just like to take a moment to express solidarity and support of our brothers and sisters in Israel who are undergoing fire. Recently, at the Ban HaPoel meetings of the WZO in Israel, I had a chance to meet with Israelis who live in the South. They love their lives there and are very happy and thriving. However, they are extremely frustrated and discouraged by the ongoing situation. We hope and pray that the ceasefire holds and that there's a peaceful resolution soon. This is an important symposium. Anti-Semitism is so prevalent, and I just had an experience yesterday that I want to share with you. My plumber was doing some repairs in my home, and I live in suburban Bergen County, not too far from here. My plumber, who is not Jewish, knows that we are, and he lives in the neighboring town. And these are very relatively quiet, uneventful, peaceful towns. And he said to me that his daughter goes to their local public school and is very friendly with a Jewish girl who has welcomed her. The Jewish girl had welcomed her, the plumber's daughter, into her home. And he said, as a result of her friendship with this Jewish girl, she has been receiving all kinds of anti-Semitic threats. So we really have to be aware and know what's going on and be prepared. The tasks of the AZM is to promote Zionism and defend Zionism in the United States. We also want to deepen and expand our relationship with the American community and connect them to Zionism. We want to facilitate the collaboration amongst all the Zionist organizations. And as we mentioned, the AZM is also the Zionist Federation in the United States, affiliated with the World Zionist Organization. Our constituent organizations represent American Zionists within the national institutions of Israel. It is really necessary for us to be a part of educating and responding and preventing anti-Semitism. Our goal in the AZM is to move Zionism forward, and today we would also like to focus not only on anti-Semitism, but anti-Zionism as a particular aspect. We have a wonderful program planned for you, very exciting speakers, and we hope you come away educated and geared up for action. At this point, I'd like to invite the Israeli Consul General, Danny Dayan, to give us some greetings from Israel.
One technical announcement while the Consul General is coming up. There will be the presentation by Mr. Hagoel. You have earphones for those who need a Hebrew translation. Please make sure to return them at the end. I think it's channel 1. I think the Consul General will speak in English, but you will have them, and please return them at the end. Thank you again to Alicia Post, who's our program director, who I should have mentioned at the very beginning, for making this happen.
To turn them on, just push the middle button, hold it down for a second, and then it will be channel 1.
Channel 1.
Right.
If you have any questions, I'll be in the back of the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can speak in Spanish if you prefer, but I'm not sure you have the appropriate translation. Very glad to be here. I mean, in the sense that to meet committed Zionists, it's unfortunate that we have to convene this meeting in order to deal with the growing anti-Zionism and growing anti-Semitism in this country and in other parts of the world. I strongly recommend, I wouldn't do it every day, but I do recommend that you read today the New York Times. There is a very telling op-ed from a sophomore in GW in George Washington University about his experiences as a progressive Zionist on campus, and we have a lot to learn from that op-ed of a courageous young Jew that will never, as they say, leave his Zionism at the door of progressiveness. I want to say something somewhat unconventional regarding the topic we are discussing. I think sometimes that we devote too much effort to convince the others that anti-Zionism is also anti-Semitism. Why? Not because it's not. Of course it is. But because even if it wasn't, even if it weren't, anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism is bigotry by itself. To be an anti-Zionist, whether you have Jewish friends or you don't have Jewish friends, whether you hate Jews or you are indifferent to Jews, to be anti-Zionism is an extreme form of bigotry. Because what does it mean to be an anti-Zionist? It means that you deny the most persecuted people in history, that you deny the most oppressed people in history, that you denied the most massacred people in history the right to self-determination in its ancient homeland. So even if your motivation is not, and usually it is, but even if your motivation is not anti-Semitic, you still are a bigot if you are an anti-Zionist. To be an anti-Zionist means that you deny history, that you deny the connection of the Jewish people to its ancient homeland, that you make efforts to claim that in the Temple Mount there was never a Jewish temple. In that sense, anti-Zionism is not only ahistoric, it resembles denial of other events more recent in Jewish history, the Holocaust. So, anti-Zionism by itself is bigotry, whether if it's anti-Semitism or not. But in our tradition, there are two different types of mitzvot. There is sur merah, distance yourself from doing evil things, and it's also aseh tov, do good things. To combat anti-Zionism, to combat anti-Zionists is sur merah, is distance yourself from evil. But we have also to aseh tov, to do good. And to do good means that we have to make a concerted effort, a huge effort, to liberate, to emancipate the word Zionism from those that hijacked it, from those that kidnapped it. When I sometimes I want to suffer a little bit, I make a search of the word Zionism on Twitter, and I see what people write about Zionism. There are those that say that we lost that battle, that we have to find a new nomenclature, that we have to find a new denomination. No way. The movement that Binyamin Zev Herzl founded, and we continue together, all of us, all over the world, is the most just, the most amazing, the most exciting national liberation movement human history knew. And we will not abandon it. We will reclaim it. We will preach, we will explain, we will educate, we will explain until we, as I say, release the word Zionism from those that hijacked it and kidnapped it and vilified it. We will never agree to make the Z word the four-letter word. We will continue to claim, to display with pride, with Jewish pride, our Zionism everywhere. That is the battle that we have to launch, not only against the anti-Semites that use today anti-Zionism as an elegant form to be bigots toward the entire Jewish people, but we have to be positive. Zionism is good. Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, and we will raise that flag everywhere in campuses, in progressive and in conservative movements. Zionism must be here to stay as our banner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Dayan, for your inspiring words. Ambassador Dayan is modest. He talked about a New York Times article, op-ed by a college student, but he neglected to tell you, or he modestly didn't tell you, about his own daughter, who is very active on campuses, doing a lot of work against anti-Semitism. So we applaud her as well. At this point, we are very fortunate to have Yaakov Hagoel, the Vice Chairman of the World Zionist Organization. But in his role in that capacity, he focuses so much of his day on anti-Semitism and combating anti-Semitism. He's really immersed in it, and we're very fortunate to have him address us today.
Shalom.
Shalom, everyone.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
So good to have everyone here together.
חברתי, דוקטור פרנסין שטיין,
My dear friend, Dr. Francine Stein, National Board Chair of American Zionist Movement, Herman Bloch, CEO of AZM and his great team, Alicia Post, and the rest of the team that brought this amazing event to happen. Ambassador Danny Dayan, Israeli Consul General, Rabbi Burg, Stephen Burg, CEO, Aish HaTorah, Hikind, former founder of Anti-Semitism, Americans Against Antisemitism, Kent Bob, President of Ameinu, Sima Vaknin-Gill, former Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs, Mr. Mark Weitzman from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Simcha Leibowitz, representative of the Zionist Organization in the United States, Moshe Freidler, my good friend, distinguished guests. A few hours ago, he came on a flight from Ben Gurion Airport to New York. I came here when in the background there were tons of shootings all over Israel. My oldest son, right before I came here, sent me a photo of him inside of a tank right next to Gaza. Not oi, we're very proud of our IDF, the most moral military in the world, that although
שנפלו על ישראל, אני לא אומר רק על דרום ישראל, כי כמו שאנחנו יודעים,
I'm not talking about only southern Israel, but in the last 5 years, hundreds of missiles were shot. We continued being the most moral military in the world. I'd like to send from here, and I believe from that on behalf of each and every one of you, to strengthen the soldiers of the IDF. And the citizens of Israel, within the last 5 days, stood up in the forefront and had to deal with the missiles
ואנחנו בטוחים
in all of our streets, and we're certain that we will continue
בצדקת דרכנו
in the righteous way that we take. And from here,
נמשיך לקרוא
we will continue
עם
to call
אחד,
for the
גם אלה
unity
שיושבים כאן,
of the people of
גם אלה
Israel
שיושבים בצד.
from here, who sit here in the diaspora, and with our brothers and sisters in Israel.
חברים יקרים,
Distinguished friends,
אנחנו נמצאים בפתחה
we're in the beginning
שנת 2020.
of 2020,
המציאות הקשה
and the harsh reality
שעובר עמנו
that our people
בשנים
is
האחרונות,
going through in recent years,
וכאן בארצות הברית,
and here
ביתר
in the
שאת,
United States
בשנה האחרונה,
even more in the last year.
היא מציאות
It is a
שאנחנו
reality
לא יכולים
that
לעצור.
we cannot close our eyes
זו
to.
מציאות
It is a reality
שאסור לנו
that we
לשים
must
את הראש
not
בחול כמו בת יענה.
bury our heads down in the sand.
המציאות היא
The reality is
שיש כאן אנטישמיות
that there is
ברחובות.
an
אני
anti-Semitism
אומר כאן, אני
in the
מדבר על
streets.
העולם כולו.
I'm talking about all over the world.
הבעיה היא לא בעיה של היהודים.
And the problem is not the problem of the Jews only. It's a worldwide problem.
העולם צריך להבין,
The world has to understand,
שוב,
again,
האנטישמיות
that anti-Semitism
שאנחנו חשבנו
that we thought
שנעלמה לפני
that has already
75
disappeared
שנה,
75 years ago,
ואחרי זה חשבנו
and then we thought
שהיא נעלמה לפני 71 שנים,
that it disappeared 71 years ago.
היא לא נעלמה.
It did not disappear.
היא הייתה כאן תמיד.
It was here always.
והיא היום מרימה ראש.
And nowadays, it raises its head up
האנטישמיות הזאת,
in a very bad way. This anti-Semitism,
שהאחים שלנו באירופה
in which our brothers and sisters in Europe
חוששים
are afraid
לקבוע מזוזה,
to hang on their mezuzahs and the doorposts of their
חוששים
homes.
להסתובב
People are
עם
afraid
כיפה על הראש
to wear
ברחובות.
the yarmulkes in the streets.
לי ברור,
It is very clear to me,
והיום לצערי ביתר
and
שאת,
unfortunately even more today,
זה לא רק באירופה.
that it's not only in Europe.
התופעה
This phenomena,
תופעה עולמית.
it's a worldwide one.
והיא לא מגיעה רק מימין,
It does not come only from
היא
the
לא
right,
מגיעה רק מהשמאל,
it does not come only from the left,
היא לא מגיעה רק ממניעים דתיים
not from
נוצריים,
religious,
ולא
Christian
רק ממניעים
backgrounds,
מוסלמים,
not only from
וכל
Muslim background,
המסכות האלה
and all these disguises
שמנסים להשתמש
that people are trying
באנטי-ציונות,
to use as anti-Zionism or
כל זה
anti-Israel.
מכבסת מילים,
Everything is a
שמגרדים את זה,
disguise for the word of anti-Semitism.
זו
When you scratch it down, this is anti-Semitism.
וזה מה שצריך לומר.
And this is something that needs to be told out loud.
ואנחנו רואים שישנה עלייה
And we see, we're witnessing a
בכמות
rise
האירועים האנטישמיים כל שנה.
of anti-Semitic incidents
זה
every
נכון,
single year.
ולצערנו השנה,
It is true that unfortunately, this
בגלל
past year,
האירוע המחריד
due to the horrific
בפיטסבורג,
attack in Pittsburgh,
יש יותר מודעות.
there's more awareness
אבל
to the situation.
המגמה
However,
הייתה מגמה בשנים האחרונות,
the trend
לא רק עכשיו.
it's not from now. It's from recent years and not from
אנחנו צריכים
nowadays.
להבין
We have to understand,
שאנחנו חייבים
we
להוריד את
must
המסכות האלה,
take off those masks,
להוריד את המילים היפות,
get rid of those
את ההצדקות
beautiful words or justifications
של זכויות אדם,
of human rights,
של חופש ביטוי,
of freedom of speech,
של דמוקרטיה,
of democracy.
הכל נכון,
Everything is right.
אבל צריך
It's
להסתכל
correct, but you have to
מה
look
הבסיס,
at the
מאיפה זה
base,
בא.
where it is coming from.
קראתי אתמול
Yesterday I read
דוח של ה-FBI,
a report by the
לא של
FBI,
ההסתדרות הציונית העולמית,
not by the World Zionist Organization,
אפילו לא של ה-AZM.
and not by the
FBI.
American Zionist Movement, but by the FBI.
הם מספרים על שנת
And they're
2018,
talking about 2018, in which
58%
50%
מהעבירות
58%
ופשעי שנאה
of
בארצות
the
הברית
so-called hate crimes in the United States
סווגו ברקע אנטי-יהודי.
were classified on an anti-Jewish background.
ואני אומר לכם, אנחנו כבר כמה שנים קוראים מחקרים
For the past
של
few
האיחוד
years,
האירופאי
we've been following and reading
שמדברים על דיווח של יהודים
reports by the
על
EU
אירועים אלימים אנטישמיים.
on reports of Jews on anti-Semitism.
ש-80% מהיהודים
Reports show
באירופה
that
שנפגעים
80%
באלימות
of
אנטישמית
those
לא
who
מדווחים
were
עליהם לשום
attacked
גורם.
by anti-Semitism in Europe do not report it to
ואני אומר
anyone,
לכם,
to any source. And I'm telling you today,
המספרים האלה של
and
ה-FBI שהם חמורים,
these numbers,
הם לא מתקרבים
horrific
לאמת
numbers
האמיתית.
by the FBI are not even getting closer to the truth, to the real numbers. Because we are getting
לא
used
לדווח.
not to report about
כי
anti-Semitism.
אנחנו מתרגלים
We're getting
לגזרה
to
שקשה
the fact
להיות יהודי.
that it's very hard to be
אסור שזה
Jewish.
יקרה.
We must not let this happen.
אנחנו חייבים
We
להרים
must
את הראש
raise our
בגאווה
heads up
יהודית.
high with Jewish pride
ולהגיד עד כאן.
and to say enough is enough.
כל מי שאומר לנו,
Every person, whoever tells us,
אפילו בטוקבק,
even by
אפילו
talkback
בהערה
online
ברחוב,
or just
שחלק
saying
גדול
something
מאיתנו אומר,
down the street.
לא שמענו, התעלמנו,
Some people are saying,
לא
we did
להתעלם
not really
יותר.
hear it. Or we
על
just
כל
like
טוקבק
we
להגיד,
did not really
על
care.
כל הערה
We
להגיד.
have to respond to everything.
אנחנו כאן
We are here, every comment.
בזכות.
We are here for our
ואנחנו
right,
נחליט
because of our
לגור
right.
איפה שאנחנו
And
רוצים
we
לגור,
will
ואנחנו
make our own
נקיים
decision on where we want to live,
את המנהגים
and
שלנו.
we shall maintain
איפה
our
שנמצא,
traditions
ואיך
anywhere we
שנמצא,
want,
כמו כל
however we
אזרח
want,
אחר.
just like any other citizen in the world.
אנחנו חייבים להפסיק.
We have
ואני אומר
to
שוב,
put a stop to this.
האחריות
And I'm telling this again,
והבעיה היא לא שלנו.
the responsibility and the
אבל לנו
problem
יש
does not belong
אחריות
to us.
כמנהיגים של העם הזה,
However, we have the responsibility of leaders of this
לקיים את
people
העם הזה.
to continue
מי
maintaining this
שחושש
people.
להיות יהודי,
Because whoever is
בסופו של
afraid
דבר לא יהיה
to
יהודי.
be Jewish,
ואנחנו
at the end of the day
חייבים
will no
באחריות שלנו
longer be
כמנהיגים
Jewish.
יהודים
And it is our responsibility as
לחזק את
Jewish
הגאווה
leaders
היהודית,
to
לחזק את
strengthen
הזהות היהודית. רק
Jewish
כך
identity,
נצליח לעבור.
Jewish pride, and only thus we shall be able to pass
אני
through
רוצה
this
להודות לכם
harsh time.
ולומר
I
לכם,
would like to thank
בואו
each and every
נרים
one
את
of you
הראש בגאווה
and say,
יהודית.
let us
עם
raise up our
ישראל
heads
חי.
and
תודה
say,
רבה.
Am Israel Chai. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yaakov, for all of the efforts that you do all around the world. I know it's a tireless job, and we really appreciate it. Before we start the program, I'm just going to call on Eitan Bahar. He has something, an exciting app to tell you about.
Thank you, Francine. Thank you so much for being here. Just a quick note by the World Zionist Organization. Kindly raise your hands, those who do not have a smartphone. Anyone? Oh, okay. So I guess.
Really? Yeah. Wow.
I would like to introduce you to one important thing by the World Zionist Organization. It's called Zionet. Zionet introduces you to Zionism online, an interactive game basically with your family, with your loved ones, with your grandchildren, with your children. Basically, it has a Zionist trivia with questions. When was Herzl born, or where the Jabotinsky buried? Anything that has to do with Zionism, you guys have it on your app. Not only that, we also have, you can find it outside, and whoever needs it, I'm happy to hand it out at the end of this evening. We do have the important dates of Zionist history that will basically sync with your calendar on your cell phone. So just look it up, Zionet, on the App Store or on iOS and Android. It's free. And yes, it is free. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eitan.
Thank you. Eitan Bahar, who just made the announcement. Shh. Eitan Bahar is with the WZO. The spelling of that, so I have it on my phone, and I do have the calendar synced to it's Zionet, Z-I-O-N-E-T, and that's the app, and it does work to sync to your phone as well. I want to acknowledge, before we begin, the speakers that we also have been joined by Marlene Post, who needs no introduction in the American Jewish Zionist world, who's leader of past national board chair of AZM and longtime leader of Hadassah and everything else. So we have in terms of the program, we have a number of speakers this afternoon. Shh. And we're going to hear from them in order. Brooke Goldstein, unfortunately, was ill today and not able to come. So we're going to therefore rejiggle things a little, and we're going to have each of our speakers, we've asked them to take up to 5 minutes to address the topic in order that they're listed here, and then we will have an opportunity for questions and discussions. We have, when we get towards that, we have index cards on the table, and we'll ask you to write your questions. Jeff Becker from the AZM staff and Alicia will collect the cards and bring them up forward so that we have a discussion coming from the questions that you've submitted. So I'd like to begin with asking Avi Gordon to address us. Avi is the executive director of Alumni for Campus Fairness. There's a flyer that he provided that's outside on the table as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you to AZM, to Herbert, to Alicia for putting this together. It's a really important symposium, and I'm very happy to be here. As Herbert mentioned, my name is Avi Gordon. I'm the executive director of a relatively new organization called Alums for Campus Fairness. There were flyers outside, and what we are is we're an organization that brings alumni together from universities across the country under one roof, under one voice to counter bigotry, to counter the anti-Semitism, anti-Israel rhetoric that's happening on campus. As we know, college campuses are a hotbed for anti-Semitism, for anti-Israel rhetoric. As mentioned before, in the op-ed that Ambassador Dayan just mentioned in the New York Times, which I read this morning, and obviously his daughter is very involved at Columbia, and obviously it's an epidemic. There's an issue that's happening on campus. So what we're doing is we manifest ourselves by having chapters across the country. We have over 35 chapters across the country, from UCLA to Columbia University, University of Michigan. I can keep going, but I'll save time. And we have hundreds and hundreds of members who are a part of our network. And so our UCLA chapter, our UCLA alumni, they're not necessarily in Los Angeles, but they are UCLA alumni, and they're worried about their alma mater. And so what makes this different from other organizations, other student groups, is that we're explicitly not a student group, but we do have a seat at the table on every campus because we are representing alumni. We have chapter leadership, meaning like presidents per chapter, including leadership, like executive councils who convene with us, and we meet with the administration. We do petitions, letter writing campaigns for the administration, and we have a seat at the table. What do universities care about? They care about two things: their reputation and their donor dollars. And those are two things that alumni, frankly, represent and can change. And what we're here to do is to educate alumni about what's happening on campus, to expose what's happening on campuses for the administration, because many times, surprisingly, they actually have no idea what's going on their own campus. They don't recognize necessarily that students are being discriminated against, are feeling unsafe on campus. They're worried about wearing, like was said before, about wearing their kippah or wearing an IDF shirt on campus. They feel like they're being demonized. And so what we're here to do is, from an alumni perspective, is to help the students feel safer and to ensure that there is a place for open dialogue for everyone to be able to have a real debate on campus where real topics can be discussed in a respectful manner. We work with many different pro-Israel organizations on campus, from the Israel on Campus Coalition to Stand With Us to Hillel International. That list could go on as well. But we're really kind of, we're the only group that works with alumni specifically, and we're proud to fill this role that's much needed, and we're growing on a daily basis. We have, as I said before, we have over... This doesn't work. Shut it off.
That's not it.
Anyways. Okay. So we have, as I said before, over We have over 35 chapters across the country with more than 5,400 members, and our list is growing from University of California at San Diego, where an apartheid wall happened in May of last year. We got over 1,400 members together under one roof to speak to the administration to address what's going on. And most recently, here locally, we came out with a dossier on Columbia University, where we exposed over the last 3 years over 100 incidents of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel happenings on campus, whether it be swastikas drawn on offices, whether it be students feeling unsafe. We were able to work with actually Ambassador Zion's daughter Ophir on it, and we were published across the board, whether it be Jerusalem Post to the Alumni or to Fox News. We've been able to spread this and to expose what's happening at Columbia University. While I do have a robust Hillel and a fantastic study abroad program at Tel Aviv University, there's a lot more work to be done at Columbia, and it's imperative for us that we're able to share with our over 500 alumni represented with Alums for Campus Fairness at Columbia University that there is much more work to be done, and President Bollinger needs to be held accountable. And so we plan on having a meeting with him shortly to talk about this. So that gives you a little flavor of who we are and what we're doing, and I'll pass it on, Herbert, to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry for the microphone issues. I hope all can hear. Mark Weitzman is the Director of Government Affairs for the Simon Wiesenthal Center, but besides that title and being a neighbor in Westchester, he has, in case he doesn't boast, he's really the driving force behind the IRA Declaration and has represented many international bodies, represented the center and American delegations in many international bodies, including the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, whose statement on anti-Semitism includes this aspect of it, which I'm sure Mark will address, and he's really the driving force and the author behind that. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Herbert. Thank you, Francine. And thank you all for coming here for the opportunity to speak to you today. Was told we had 5 minutes, and in that 5-minute time period, we're supposed to solve everything in the world. So let's go ahead and do that. And I think that one of the things I'm going to start with is Herbert mentioned a little bit about the working definition of anti-Semitism. I'm going to focus on that because, one, it's practical, two, it's a major success, and it probably is, in some ways, the most important development in fighting anti-Semitism over the last 2-3 decades. But I also want to point out that I'm sort of coming here from a different perspective than everybody else is. Because when I introduced that to IRA, and I'll tell you what IRA is in a second, it was not coming from a perspective of dealing with Zionism. As a matter of fact, that was very far removed. It was so far removed that I literally had to ask the Israeli government not to be out front on that issue, on pushing the definition. So let me explain why and how that works in this regard and why Still, with that or despite that, it's an extraordinarily positive tool. So first of all, IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, is the only intergovernmental organization that exists solely to deal with issues related to the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. It was founded 20 years ago in Sweden, and originally consisted of 5 countries, including the US, Great Britain, France, Germany, and Israel. Subsequently, it's now up to 32 countries, on the cusp of joining in mid-December when we meet in Luxembourg. The requirement for joining was high-level political commitment. The application has to be signed by either the head of state or the foreign minister. It is not an insignificant political organization. On the other hand, it has no binding authority. It's not a legal organization. Nothing that is done at IRA has the effect of law. So it's only how much you can impose your will in a political or moral way. And that's how IRA functions. There are working groups associated with education, with academics, with museums and memorials, Committee on Anti-Semitism and Holocaust Denial, and about close to 10 years ago, I would say, we decided to work in the Committee on Anti-Semitism and Holocaust Denial. And in IRA, things are brought forward from the experts up to the political level, for the political level to approve or reject. And the political level, their approval has to be unanimous. To get something adopted in IRA formally requires the consensus of all member states. If one state objects, it's off the table, it's finished, it's done. So I'll tell you some of the states in a minute, but we decided to work on first definition, working definition of Holocaust denial and distortion. And earlier reference was made to the denial of Zionism being equivalent in some ways to denying the basic historical fact of the Shoah. There is a linkage there, and there's no question. But we weren't addressing that, because our mandate was to address just Holocaust, just anti-Semitism, just Holocaust denial. We insisted on putting in, I wrote most of that definition, I insisted on putting in Holocaust distortion as well, because we wanted to deal with issues in places that now we see in Poland or Hungary, where survivors or researchers or scholars can actually be prosecuted for claiming that local collaborators actually collaborated and murdered Jews. So there are ongoing attempts to not just deny, but to distort the history of the Holocaust from the highest political levels. That took 5 years to get adopted. It took a couple of years to write, and it took about 3-4 years of political work to get it adopted, because you had countries like Lithuania, Poland, Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, France, Netherlands, Belgium, in other words, the countries where the Shoah took place, that had vested interests, some of them, in keeping the record distorted and whitewashing their local history. After that was successfully done in 2013, we then decided to move on to dealing with anti-Semitism. And the reason was there was a definition of anti-Semitism that had been adopted by the Human Rights Agency of the European Union, but never formally adopted. Actually, I misspoke. It wasn't adopted. It was posted on their website. And that was being used, but when it was taken off their website as part of a reorganization, and we never found out if that was a political move because other changes were made as well or not, it doesn't really matter. It lost whatever status it had. And at the same time, we were going through, and I'm going to give you a very concrete example in a minute because I don't have much time, situations that really begged the question of what was anti-Semitism, particularly in relationship to Israel and Zionism. And so it was very easy, our definition, and there were links that, I don't know, Herbert, did we put the links?
We're going to share them.
We'll share. There are links to both definitions, but the definition that we used, and this was in conjunction with Israeli scholars like Yehuda Bauer and Dina Parat, or my American colleague Andy Baker at the AJC, etc. We based on a lot of what Natan Sharansky had developed on the 3 Ds. I'm not going to go into that at this point. But we included the fact that criticizing Israel like any other country is perfectly legitimate. But there are lines that you cross when you compare Israel to a Nazi state, or you accuse Israel of genocide, or accuse Jews of having dual loyalty and not being loyal to the country that they're citizens in, so on and so forth. You can see. And we listed 11 concrete examples, and there could be more, could be less. And this took another 3 years to get done, and would not have been accomplished without the Herculean efforts of a Romanian diplomat named Mihnia Constantinescu, who unfortunately passed away a year ago, but was one of the unsung heroes of the fight against anti-Semitism. Why is this definition so important? 2 reasons, or 3 reasons. One, it includes the Israel examples. So even though that wasn't our original focus, it plays out as we're seeing here. So how does that really work in real life? 2014, summer of 2014, in Wuppertal, Germany, a shul that had been destroyed in Kristallnacht, rebuilt, was firebombed as a result of what was happening in Gaza. 2 people were arrested, confessed to the crime, and said it was a political protest. They were upset. 1 German court and then an appeals court in Germany both agreed that this was not a hate crime motivated by anti-Semitism, but it was allowed political speech. Which meant, in other words, that you could, as part of any protest against Israel, you could legitimately firebomb and throw Molotov cocktails at a synagogue. The Germans, to their credit, were really upset at the higher levels. But this illustration is exactly why we needed a working definition. So it's legally non-binding, no one can go to jail for it, but it is a working definition of anti-Semitism that included instances like that, and subsequently, it was adopted after IRA adopted it in 2016. It was subsequently adopted by, we're now up to almost 20 other countries, starting with Great Britain. Just 2-3 days ago, Greece announced that they were adopting it as well. Both definitions. Greece is the first country to adopt both definitions, the Holocaust denial definition as well. And it establishes a common basis for understanding what anti-Semitism is, including elements of anti-Zionism that are clearly anti-Semitic. It shows an international consensus of what the term refers to. Our State Department has it on its website and uses it and urges our allies to use it. Department of Education has now announced that they will use it in regard to potential hate crime on college campuses. And I will just add in conclusion that to me, the best illustration of how it can be used was the fact that it was the focal point of the discussion, not this past summer, but 2018, in the United Kingdom, in which Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party were challenged around the definition, to whether to adopt the definition, where they stood on it. It framed the issue of how they had to reply on their own perspectives on anti-Semitism. And if that wasn't enough, and with this I'll conclude, it actually engendered a letter signed by 68 British rabbis of all denominations, male and female, across the board from Haredi to liberal, in support of the definition. And if it had accomplished nothing else in my lifetime than bring 68 rabbis together under that thing, I would say it's a practical success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to now, we will send out the, as some follow-up materials, we'll send out the link to the IRA declaration for all to see. It was adopted by the AZM, it was adopted by the WZO and the Jewish Agency, and has become sort of the gold standard for many of these discussions. I'd now like to welcome up to here Sima Vaknin-Gill, who has many titles. We put in her title with the IDF as a brigadier general, and I believe in the Air Force. She is the former director of the Israel Ministry of Strategic Affairs, and has done a lot of work in the area of BDS and anti-Zionism, and was, to our luck, in the United States this week and able to join us here. She's been here together with the organization Combat AntiSemitism, which AZM and many other organizations are a part of, and which has been co-sponsoring and assisting us with these programs, and thanks to them, and welcome you here today.
Thank you all for hosting me today. I'm very proud to be here. Especially proud as being an Israeli, an IDF soldier, and a proud Zionist. And we should never forget that. I've spent more than 32 years in the Israeli Defense Forces, and when I served in the army, I always thought that over there I've done the most important job fighting our enemies. You know, working against Hezbollah and Iran and Hamas. You think that this is the most important thing, and this is what is our main challenges in the world. And then 2 months into my retirement leave, Gilad, the Minister of Strategic Affairs, called me and asked me to lead the campaign, the counter-campaign against BDS. And again, I thought I was doing the most important thing, because fighting delegitimization of Israel, fighting BDS, which is just one symptom of delegitimization, back then, 4 years ago, seemed to me as something that we have to do because it affects everybody, it poisons the atmosphere, and it has to be done. And again, I thought that I was doing the most important thing, and then I've learned something else, that BDS and delegitimization is just one symptom of a greater phenomenon, which is anti-Semitism. This time, BDS and delegitimization is coming from the left wing. We also have the right wing, which everybody knows about, and we also have radical Islam. Mainly, we look at it as if it's a European issue, but it also growing right here under our nose, and this is something we should take care of. So all in all, it's been more than 36 years that I'm fighting for something all the time, and hopefully, one of those days, I will have the time to rest. What I've done in the ministry is try to look at the issue of delegitimization from a bird's view. Meaning not just working on campuses, not just working with unions, not just looking about what's happening in culture, what is the companies who are being attacked in order for them to leave Israel, but trying to look at the whole phenomena, try to understand what is the motives, what is the forces, who are the organization, where's the money coming from, what is the ideology, looking at everything from a bird's view, which is called an overall strategy. And that's what I've done in the ministry for 4 years, and we have created a task force. We have run the counter campaign. I'm very happy to say that we have succeeded in many cases. We have lost in other cases. But on and all, we always have to start with some questions and then come up with a strategy. So with your permission, in those 5 minutes that I was allocated, which is very hard, something I've done before in 6 months, but let me try to do it in 5 minutes. I've asked myself 2 questions, and I'll try to answer them in headlines, and then I'll share with you my view as how we as a whole, not just Combat Antisemitism, not just this organization or that organization, not that particular initiatives, but we as the Jewish people and those who are caring for us and those who are willing to become our partners should tackle the issue of antisemitism. So the first question I ask myself is, what is anti-Zionism? The answers to these 2 questions that I'm putting on the table will help me eventually come up with a strategy. So the way I see anti-Zionism, and we don't have to agree, by the way, that's the fun of it. Each one can have its own definition of what is anti-Zionism, but the way I see it. The first thing is that someone else is defining to us who we are, meaning they are not accepting us as a nation, they are not accepting us as a people, they only look at us as a community and a religion. The second thing is, which is based on the first, is if you're just a religion, then you don't have to have a country of your own. And that's why they are not willing to have the declaration of ourselves as the nation and the self-determination inside Israel as a democratic country for the Jewish people, because they accept democratic country for everybody. The third thing is that anti-Zionism is a very sophisticated and new way to channel ideas which are basically anti-imperialistic, anti-nationalistic. They are channeling it through anti-Zionism, but what pisses me off is that it's only against us. Because why do they do it against us? But they prefer to embrace the nationality of the Palestinians, because that is exactly what it is, being an anti-Zionist. So this is a double standard, one of the 3 Ds that Nathan Sharansky came up with, and this is something which, for me, helps to come to the other question, which is why anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Well, here I would use a little bit of the logic that we implemented fighting delegitimization. The first thing it is part of a whole full cycle of hate. They hate us because of our race, they hate us because of our religion, they hate our political entity, which is Israel, and now they come after our basic idea, which is Zionism. And there is a great overlap between the different manifestation of those four types of hate. And this is what makes it anti-Semitism. The second answer I gave myself is that this is an idea whitewashing of another anti-Semitic. It is more sophisticated, it is supposedly more progressive, it is more politically correct to be an anti-Zionist than anti-Semite, but all in all, it is the same thing. They simply dressed up anti-Semitism in a more nice clothes. Third, and this I will attribute to Aliza Levin, which is not here, but this is her idea and I liked it a lot. She said, Zionism is part of who I am. This is my identity. I am, this is our DNA. It's embedded in our DNA. Love in Zion, yearning for Zion. You can expect me to shed this thing of my identity, because otherwise I won't be Jewish. Just as you can't ask a Jewish person not to save Shabbat, for example. And the last thing, and this is something that I've seen in the ministry a lot, there is a great overlap between the one who is anti-Zionist and the ones who are anti-Semites. Not everybody who are anti-Zionist are anti-Semites, not everybody who are anti-Semites are anti-Zionist, but there is a great lab between them, and mainly we can see that when it comes to the delegitimization campaign, mainly in Arab countries, mainly in hard, far left entities, and mainly in radical Islam. So I'm going to offer you a three-layered strategy, which is a base for a global counter-campaign. We've been starting to do that a little bit with some of the organizations who are part of the pro-Jewish World Network. And with your permission, I would like to divide it into three. Just like in the physical world, when we are coming from the army using it as a three-layer strategy, this is the way I'll do it, metaphorically. There is the internal part, there is the borderline, and there is the external part. The internal part is working inside ourselves, Jewish communities and Israel. The borderline is those who are basically pro-us, and those who can help us change atmosphere. And the externals, this is the offense. There we should work against the generators, and there is the place where we should try to influence those who are being influenced by the adversaries. In the eternal, the main theme is strengthening and defense. And I think it's been said before, the 3 A's, we have to be aware, we have to accept the times have changed, and we have to take action. And in this case, we have to be in unity, we have to unite all our efforts together. We also have to have physical defense, and we have to have something which I'm not sure you're familiar with this term, but it comes from the Israeli Air Force. In the Israeli Air Force, you will never go to battle unless you have aerial superiority. In this case, I would say our kind of battle is that we must have information superiority. We should always know who we are tackling, who are the enemies in this case, not just adversaries. They are enemies, and we should declare them as that. We should know where they are working, and don't think that you know what is happening unless you went into some of the sites of the unregulated sites in the internet. There you would see the true anti-Semitism. And we should detect and define and diagnose and later have alerts to every Jewish entity which we want to protect. The second borderline, in this case, if before it was defense, on the borderlines of the Jewish community in Israel, we should do force building and immune. And in this case, we should do coalition and alliances. I don't think I have to tell you too much about that. But I want to say that something which is not being done here, I think, too much, and is being done in Europe and works a lot, working with establishment, working with the governments, working with the municipalities, using international organizations, working with churches. This is the only way to secure the borders of us. We should recruit internet giants. We should recruit media giants, because they are the only ones who can change atmosphere. No matter what we do, we will never be able to change the whole atmosphere. But change one regulation in Facebook and you would have a major success. And last but not least, we should use legislation. We should initiate legislation when we can, but if we have already one, use it. France are doing it. In France, they are doing it quite fine. And the offense. And this is what we've done. I would say it very cautiously because there are cameras here. This is mainly what I've done in the office. We should think of ourselves as the warrior for the next generation of Jewish kids. This is who we are. And we have to take this position. Just as in Israel, I looked at myself as someone who has to secure the Israel for my kids. So we should expose, and we should impose, and we should enforce, and we should put price tag on anti-Semitism. Because today they don't pay any price tag for practicing anti-Semitism. We can go after the money trail, we can link them to terror, just like we have done in the ministry, and we can link them to terror wherever we can. And if we can, at least we've tried. And I think we should use the legal possibilities, such as lawsuits. I'm so sorry Brooke is not here, because this is exactly what she's doing, and she's right. This is exactly the kind of perception that you have to use working against those people, and not give up. And we should put focus effort on hubs, not go to any fringe expression, but go to the hubs. So I would focus on academia, and I would focus on unions, and I would focus on political parties in some cases, such in the UK and such in here. And in some cases, very rare cases, there is one man who can change the picture. So sometimes we can focus on figures and try on people and try to expose them for who they are, which is anti-Semite. And in a nutshell, this is what we are trying to do in CAS. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to mention, as Sima said, since we have a camera, this program will be on the AZM, post on the AZM website at some point, and we also are grateful that JBS TV, Jewish Broadcast Service, is here, and they will be airing that in the future. I do want to also acknowledge Liz Burney, who I may have missed before, who was another AZM board member. Now I'd like to introduce Kenneth Bob. Ken is the president of Ameinu, which is one of the AZM member organizations, a longtime leader in the American Zionist Movement, and was our past national board chair, and will share his perspective as well. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Herbert, Yaakov, Francine. It's great to be here today. I'm going to start with a story. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at the Limud conference in Vancouver. And the organizers asked if I could come earlier so I could meet with members of Parliament, of the Canadian Parliament. As people know, like here in America, Congress members go home for the weekend to work in their districts. And so the Western Canadian-based members of Parliament would go from Ottawa back home to Vancouver, Victoria, and meet with their constituents. Would I be willing to meet with them and talk to them about an initiative we had called the Third Narrative, which is talking to the left about Israel? Because these members they wanted me to meet with were members of the New Democratic Party, the NDP, which is the Democratic Socialist Party of Canada. I said, sure. And I met in the CIJA office. For those who don't know, CIJA is kind of a mix of AIPAC and JCRC together. It's the Canadian version. And they work to advocate on behalf of Israel and the Jewish community. So I sat in the CIJA office in the Vancouver JCC over the course of a Friday afternoon, and a rotating cast of members of Parliament came through the room. And a woman came in, an Asian woman came in very late in the conversation, said, I'm very sorry, I was dealing with some immigration issues in my district. She had just been elected to federal office, she'd been a local politician, and she said, I'm sure you've already covered this. Could you just explain one thing? Why do Jews need a state? And I said, okay. And they're going to close the JCC for Shabbat in about 20 minutes. And I said, well, first of all, you have to understand the Jews are a people. And she said, oh. And I proceeded over about 10, 15 minutes to explain Zionism to her. And she furiously wrote in her notebook, and she said, thank you so much. This will help me with my constituents. And I tell this story to really explain just in a couple minutes my take on this question, because what I do and what our organization do and what many of us do is deal with the left. Now, people talked about anti-Zionism from the left. That's a real thing. It's a political thing that we need to find ways of dealing with, but the best people to deal with anti-Zionism from the left are actually the progressive Zionists. As I like to say, we speak the language. I'm an alum of Berkeley, University of California in Berkeley. I speak Berkeley. It's a very important language. So first of all, it means that we can talk to them in the language they understand about national liberation. Donnie mentioned it earlier, and other people did as well. Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. You talk about a liberation movement. They believe in other liberation movements. You can critique Israeli politics. You can be actually a severe critique of Israeli policy, but still be a Zionist and be a loyal supporter of Israel. We have to address their very core issues, the opposition of the right of Israel to exist, because that's what Zionism is, the rightful place for the Jewish people to have a homeland. Everything after that is policy, and we can disagree on policy, but we must target these issues. We talk a lot about eavesdroppers. There's a lot of people in campuses and communities. I do a lot of speaking in the Muslim and Christian community. A lot of people are eavesdropping the discussion about Israel. They haven't formed strong opinions. We need to frame the argument in a way they can find a place to be supportive of Israel. Just driving here today, I got invited to an Episcopal church in suburban Maryland. And the person who invited me said, I'm pro-Israel. Most of the people on my Holy Land committee are not. Right? The Holy Land Committee. So I've got to find a way then to speak to that Episcopal church in language they will understand, that they understand they can support Israel's right to exist while they're critiquing some of the policies they read about in the newspapers every day. I brought some copies of a booklet that I'm happy to share with you or send to you. It's called The Third Narrative, Progressive Answers to the Far Left Critique of Israel. And again, we have to understand, this was mentioned, Sima referred to this as well, there's a range of opinions on the left. There's the left, and there's the far left, there's the anti-Israel left, and we need also to discern who our allies can be on the left. Where in the labor union movement and other movements on the left we can find allies to help support our case. One last thing I want to mention, I mentioned the eavesdroppers is a very important idea, engaging with people who aren't sure of the issues, who need more education. Secondly, I get asked a lot on campus when I go in and talk to a varied audience, and I get asked, well, if not BDS, what? It's very important that we have what to offer those progressive students, those progressive churches who are looking to be involved around the Middle East, and if we've convinced them that BDS is counterproductive and wrong, then what do we offer them? And I'll give you a couple ideas. First of all, there was a wonderful campaign. Amherst is a very liberal campus up in Massachusetts, where there was a divestment conference a few years ago, and the very progressive pro-Israel group on campus came up with the idea of invest, don't divest. And they had students donate $2 a piece. Okay, $2, less than a cup of coffee. $1 went to an NGO in Israel, and $1 went to an NGO in the West Bank that was dealing in coexistence. And this is a way to tell students there's something that you can do that's positive, that invests in peace. Second of all, there are lots of NGOs that are doing what we call cross-border work. I'm involved in one called Project Rosanna that works on Israeli-Palestinian healthcare cooperation. There's Kids for Peace, there's the Hand-in-Hand Schools, all kinds of projects that are all about coexistence and cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians. And in some ways, both, it does good work in the region, and I believe in that. It also has a political message we can share with people in communities and campuses. We can say, BDS is destructive. It doesn't bring us any closer to peace. Let's find something constructive to do. Lastly, there's a lot of different battlefields. That's been spoken about today. One of the ones that I think is very important that actually we've been involved with is fighting back against academic boycotts of Israel. It's a very important place to be. Obviously, academia, we've spoken about the students. The professors is also a very important area. We've put together something called the Council for Academic Freedom, the Alliance for Academic Freedom, the AAF. And these are liberal, progressive academics who, again, have critiques of Israeli policy, but work against the academic boycotts in the association. So for instance, the American Historical Association, we've beaten back resolutions there twice already to boycott Israeli academic institutions. It's probably going to come up again in January. And these are very targeted work we can do where you have to find the right language, and you can enlist a lot of alliances within those academic associations. You have those people who support us on policy. You have those people who say, yes, why are we discussing the Middle East at the American Historical Association? So there's a lot of ways of building coalitions among academics who say, this isn't our topic or we agree with you. We have to be smart when you build these coalitions. So I've talked about the eavesdropping. We have to find those people who don't know enough and we can help educate them. We can say, if not BDS, what? And target certain segments that are underserved like the academics. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to invite up here Rabbi Stephen Burg, who's the CEO of HaTorah. I guess it's HaTorah Global, which is it has a building with a great view of in the old city with a great view of the Kotel. He's between here in New Jersey and in Israel and around the world with the work of HaTorah. As Rabbi is about to speak, we will, after the Rabbi speaks and Dov Hikind, we'll have a time for questions and discussions and responses from the panel. So you have index cards on your, I know it's before two of the speakers, but you have index cards on your table and pens. So if you have questions, please prepare them, and then when we finish, we'll ask the speakers to come up, and then we will collect the cards. Alicia Post, my colleague Jeff Becker from our office, who's our elections coordinator, will also collect the cards, and we'll have a moderated discussion at that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Herbert. Thank you, Francine, for having me. HaTorah is partnered with AZM in Jerusalem, and you're a terrific partner, and we hope you keep coming back to our building. I also just want to mention Yaakov, Hagoel. We spent time in Jerusalem. Very shortly after we met, he called me back and he said, how would you feel about having 100 mayors from around Israel come to your building? And literally, I have a great view. We look out at Temple Mount from HaTorah. You'll see the Temple Mount on one side and a beautiful picture, which I just received recently, of 100 mayors overlooking that same spot. They really do amazing, amazing work, and it's an honor for me to be here and for HaTorah to be included. Just want to share with you a little bit about my journey, kind of how I got to this point in terms of BDS, in terms of anti-Zionism and all these things, and put it in this kind of historical context. I used to do a lot of work in Germany. And I used to work the Lawfare Foundation. There was a time when they were producing rabbis in Germany. And I went to Cologne for one of those ceremonies. And this is a little bit God's sense of humor. We had set this date about a year before. A couple weeks before we arrived in Cologne, the local German kind of judicial system had deemed circumcision to be illegal. And so here we were, Jews from all over Europe and America coming to Cologne at the point where the Germans are telling us that we can no longer circumcise our children. It was a pretty powerful moment. And I remember sitting at dinner with Stefan Kramer. Stefan Kramer, for those of you who may know him, terrific guy. He was a professional head of the Jewish community. And I remember asking him, I said, Stefan, is this real? Like, is this anti-Semitism? Is this just what's going on here? He said, look, let me just tell you this. He said, when you see a guy with a shaved head and a swastika tattoo talking about the pain that happens to a baby during circumcision, you know something's off. And I started to see really all over the place that anti-Semitism always hides behind either liberal or other causes. And very often you'll just catch these things all over Europe. You'll see all of a sudden ritual slaughter. They're going after ritual slaughter, right, of kosher meat. They're going after circumcision. A few years ago, we had it in San Francisco. These things pop up, and it's always been like that. So when people tell you about BDS and going after the state of Israel, this is the way it's always been. If you go back to the Middle Ages, there was a comparison of the Jews and the devil. There was blood in the matzah. There were all these things over and over again. I happen to have, in my office in Jerusalem, I happen to have a copy of Mein Kampf, the only book that Hitler ever wrote. And I think for those of us, it's important to read to really understand And you would think when you open that book that it would be very harsh, right? The Jews, they're horrible, they're terrible. But no one ever really does that. And even Adolf Hitler writes, I wanted to like the Jews, I felt bad for the Jews, and you slowly, seductively get lured in to his way of thinking about when he finally came up that we were horrible, terrible, and need to be destroyed, etc. And I think the first point here is that when we talk about anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, being it is absolutely anti-Semitism. Are there some innocent people that get caught up in it? Probably. But when you start, diving down beneath the surface, and you find people leading a movement like BDS, and you find them saying things like we should be thrown into the sea, and all the other things that say we should be gassed, etc., that is when we have to stand up. And what I really want to, there were so many great points. I think the other speakers were terrific. I really want to kind of hammer home on what I believe is the most important point, which is we have to look to the next generation of kids. And we're losing them. Not as many as you would think, but the ones we're losing are very, very loud. And for a long time in American Jewish history, we faced assimilation. We faced people just stopping to be Jews. And that was terrible, and we miss them, and we want to bring them back. But now it's even worse, because not only are we losing them, but they're being turned against us. And we're watching this happen, and there are a lot of Jewish organizations out there, and I don't think they necessarily mean this, but they're giving a little bit of a wink and a nod to these things happening. I know we have ZionNet, which everyone should download on their phone, but while you're doing that, you should follow things like If Not Now, right? There's an organization, If Not Now, which is basically, it's horrific. I mean, you just Twitter every day, you just watch what's being said. And what's worse than what's being said, and the attacks and the demonization of Israel, all those things, what's worse is they purport to be a Jewish organization. And that's our issue. I'm not here to really talk about the Gentiles or the non-Jews. I'll leave that to a lot of other experts. I'm here to talk about us. And so many of our children, next generation, are being turned against us. And they're claiming to be us. So when people attack us, that is their shield. It's not just the social causes. I have my friend the Jew here right next to me, and he's also aghast at what's going on. And so when we see things like birthright being attacked, you like birthright, you don't like birthright, it's totally irrelevant. We all have to rally to their side. When we see any other Jewish organization that's trying to do good getting attacked by these people, we need to rally up. We can't let them be the shield to these people out there. And I think it's not only that, but something that bothered me tremendously this past summer was, if you follow, again, the If Not Now, they were all over Iowa, right, with their iPhones in the face of the Democratic candidates, basically trying everything they could to get them to condemn Israel. And I remember thinking one thing. Yeah. Where are our kids? Why are our kids not in Iowa? Now, I have a son at university. He's very, very active on a Zionist level, went Shiva Kotel, etc. And they go to Times Square on Yom Ha'atzmaut, and they have a big party there. And it's awesome. It's incredible. It's amazing. But it can't just be about those positive celebrations. It has to also be, our kids have to be in Iowa. Our kids have to be in Washington. Our kids have to be in all the places that those other kids are at. So when the media focuses on those 10 kids or 20 kids who are getting arrested sitting in front of someone's office, we should have 500 kids and 1,000 kids. And generationally, we're at a very tough point. In the American Jewish history, many of our current leaders who are retiring right now grew up in the Soviet Jewry movement. Right? There was this fight, right, to free the Jews, to get up there, to go and to scream and to yell. And it really built a whole generation. And that generation is retiring. And our next generation of kids, and they're incredible, they're wonderful, they're amazing, but they need to get more active. And they need to drown out the sounds of that small minority. So number one is, and again, we have to go after that minority, we have to educate them, but we also have to make sure that our children, our community, is active, is out there making the case for Israel. It can't just be about having a celebration on Yom Ha'atzmaut. It has to be every single day going out there and being able to fight this. And I think that if we can focus, again, those that are working with the Gentile population, non-Jewish population, very important, et cetera, our message, but we have to focus on the Jews. Because if we can get that generation back, if we can get strong, then I think we can do incredible things. Thank you so much.
now like to introduce and welcome a public figure who I'm sure is known to many of us. Many years served in the New York State Assembly from Brooklyn, and founded an organization this summer called Americans Against Anti-Semitism. It's not the AAA you have in your wallet and call for road repair. It's a different AAA, Americans Against Anti-Semitism, and I'm happy to welcome here former Assemblyman Dov Hikind.
First of all, I'm delighted to be here. I'm always delighted to be in a room with people who care, people who are concerned about the situation confronting the Jewish people in particular. And I know that everybody here is concerned, and everybody that is here wants to, people here are doing things, and I think we recognize that we are faced with a very, very serious situation. American Jewry. The American Jewish Committee poll a couple of weeks ago indicated that 9 out of 10 Jews feel that anti-Semitism is a very serious problem. 90% of Jews feel that anti-Semitism is something to be very concerned about. That same poll showed that depending on the question that was asked, but it was approximately a third of American Jews will take off their Star of David when they go to a certain event. Can you imagine? By the way, we're not talking about France, we're not talking about England, we're not talking about Belgium, we're not talking about Germany. We're talking about America. We're talking about New York. We're talking about LA. We're talking about places all over this country. Jews will not go to an event, a Jewish event. Maybe an event for Israel. Maybe Fiddler on the Roof. Who knows? Because they are afraid that they will be identified and maybe become victims of the anti-Semitism that is happening in this country. And the fact is, in spite of, I appreciate what everybody said here today, the fact is, we're losing. It's that simple. We're losing. Yeah, we're doing a little here and there to make a difference, but we are losing. The last speaker, absolutely. Why are so many kids on the left, on the extreme left, the progressive Jewish kids, why are they turned on? Why are they in the streets? Where are our kids? And I'm not blaming the kids because I'm not so sure about the parents, because we're the parents. Where have they been? Have they been in the streets? Are they out there? So nothing to do with the kids. In fact, it's probably the parents' fault that the kids are not aware from a very early age. It doesn't happen suddenly. What is going on in this country should concern us. But I think there are some very important things that should be our foundation. Number one, we need to be proud to be Jews. We need to show it all the time. We never should be apologetic. Apologetic about what? A little country in the Middle East? I point out that in 1938, there were 15 million Jews in the world. 15 million. And approximately 2.5 billion people. Today, the Jewish people, depending on what numbers you look at, but many of them indicate 15 million Jews. That's all we have, 15 million Jews out of a population of 8 billion. And everyone is so consumed and so involved and so into the Jewish people and this little place, Israel, that if you go and look at a map, you can hardly find this country called Israel. A little country surrounded by enemies on all sides. And I was actually going to take your advice. By the way, Herbie and I go back a long, long time, and I'm delighted to be here with him today. But we have very, very serious problems. And, in the memo it said, let's not talk about the problem because everybody knows the problem. But everybody spoke about the problem. Right? The message was solutions. What are the answers? And by the way, no one has the answers. If anyone had the answers, they'd win the Nobel Prize next year. But there are things that we can do, and there are things that we have to do. And we have to be tough and strong. We have to be strong. We have to be proud. You know, Barry Weiss from the New York Times wrote a fabulous book on anti-Semitism. Don't agree with everything, but it is something that everyone should read. Everyone should read that book. But you know, the last chapter is how to deal with the anti-Semitism. And that's the chapter I had no clue. I had no idea. But by the way, she did talk about strength, being proud, all these concepts. And I was going to drop her a note saying it reminded me of Rabbi Meir Kahana's book, Never Again. We talked about the same concepts, about being strong and tough and not being afraid. So let me tell you some of the ideas. We need to do a lot more. We need to do a lot more than what we are doing. And here are some real suggestions. And by the way, I urge you to join Americans Against Anti-Semitism. You know, we speak very clearly. We don't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, or no party, or it doesn't matter. If you hate, there's one standard for anti-Semitism. By the way, that is not the case in America anymore. Right? The alternate right, everybody jumps and everybody condemns, and rightfully so. They are a huge threat. But when it comes to anti-Semitism on the left, you know, everybody hedges their bets. You don't hear that much. And the Weiss book indicates that, and everybody knows that. The article in the New York Times today, isn't it amazing, ladies and gentlemen? You want to solve the problems all over America? Here in New York, 1.5 million Jews in New York, and you have a situation at Columbia University, not far from here, that is out of control. There's a report that just came out 2 weeks ago. Jewish kids are afraid at that university. Jewish kids don't wear a Star of David at that university. How could that be happening in New York? I'm asking. With all the Jewish organizations that line the streets of Manhattan, and all the staff, and all the budget, how is it possible that students, young people, your children, or someone else's children, are afraid at Columbia University? They have professors teaching anti-Semitism. They have teachers teaching hate, and they get away with it. Where are we? Where is all that strength and power that we are accused of by the right? We control the media, we control everything. We're rich, the banks, and so on and so forth. But here in New York, we have situations in Columbia, NYU, Kingsborough. I have professors in my home yesterday telling me of things that are going on in Kingsborough that are out of control. So a couple of suggestions, and I urge you to join Americans Against Anti-Semitism. We just had a great victory with AOC, right? This woman came out and said that illegal immigrants coming into this country, and compared it to concentration camps, and said never again. The chutzpah, the audacity to have done something like that. We went to court and we won, and she apologized. It's amazing. So idea number one that we're going to be doing, and others should do the same. When people's civil rights and human rights are being violated, which is what's happening at many universities, your human rights are being violated. That's got to be against the Constitution. There's got to be a law that says you can't do that. You cannot create an atmosphere of fear at a university. Professors or people that come to lecture. I mean, if you showed up at Columbia University and they found out you're going to speak to a group, there'd be a riot at the university. Can you imagine that? The hypocrisy of these groups, you know, the progressive liberal groups that believe only if it's their point of view, you have a right to express your point of view. But if it's a different point of view, we're going to shut you down. We're not going to listen to you. So number one, use the law. We are putting together some top lawyers who are going to start dealing with the violation of students' human and civil rights at universities by bringing federal lawsuits against the university. And that will work. Here's something else. What do I have, another half hour? Okay. Oh.
Half a day.
Okay. Number two. How many of our young people, forget about the people who are older, how many people are really equipped to answer the tough questions? The issues that are raised by our enemies, by the BDS people, the students on campuses who think one country in the world, there are 195 countries. Did you know that approximately? Maybe it's more as of yesterday, but 195 nations in the world. One country has a BDS movement directed against her. One country in the whole world with 6.5 million Jews. Nobody else is guilty of violating every one of human rights. I mean, we know the Chinese, concentration camps for the Uyghurs, that's okay. And the violation of human rights by countries all over the world. Only one nation of the world, the home of the Jewish people, is the target of the BDS movement all over the United States and all over Europe. We need to create. The money is there. The will has to be there. We need to train our young people, kids who are entering college, the first-year freshmen. We need to train these young people. We need to encourage them. We'll pay them. We need to teach them to be experts on the issues involving Israel so that they can confront anybody, anywhere in the world in terms of the issues. We need to create this education to educate young people. Most people do not know. I wish we could have a discussion right here today about a lot of the issues involving Israel and how Israel violates the human rights of the Palestinians. Right? We could throw out a lot of things, and how do we answer those questions? How do we deal with those things? What did that say, time up?
Yeah.
Should have been in Hebrew, I would have understood. Anyway, I think I've made my point. We need to be thinking out of the box. I'm not worried. We're going to win at the end. We've been through a lot worse, the Jewish people in history. But if we're going to be successful, by the way, why hasn't there been one huge demonstration in New York against anti-Semitism? Why? Just tell me why. One, will we bring everyone together from all communities? Why? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity. Working together, we can make a huge difference, but we need to try new approaches to be successful. God bless you, and thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. We are going to have an opportunity for some discussion among our presenters with questions that have been submitted. Shh. I would like to ask our 5 presenters to come up to the table, and then we can answer the questions together. See. No. Wait, I would like the. Wait, please.
This is anti-Jewish to have those as questions. We can talk
Wait.
and ask questions. This is control. This is total control. It's not acceptable.
Please get around here. Please, Rabbi Burg.
Workable.
Well, that's what I do. I was told, come with ideas. That's who I am. Better for worse. That's
Ken.
Maybe not soaring oratory like politics.
Rabbi Borg, Dov Hikind, please come up.
I am against having questions done like this. This is the control.
Please sit down. Vered, we're going to have the security remove you, please.
This is abusive.
Okay. Please sit down. We're going to continue with questions. We're going to continue with questions so that we have a representative group of questions. We have many that were submitted and appreciated. Alicia, please ask the security to ask this lady to leave. Thank you. We're going to ask everyone to please. I want to start with, if everyone would please be seated. I know there's a lot of, we could go on for hours, but I want to start with one question from the chair's prerogative. You've heard many different perspectives from the people here today. When people get very riled up about the subject, very impassioned about Israel and anti-Zionism, and we tried to focus on the angle of what can we do practically for to combat anti-Zionism, not just as I guess Rabbi Burg mentioned. Thank you for reading the note. Not just to restate the problem, but what can we do? So I want to ask everybody a tachlis question of what can people go home today, this afternoon, to do in their community, in their shul, on the internet, or however, something tachlis, that practical, that everyone can do today for to address this issue. I'll ask everyone to please be quiet, out of respect to everyone who's here and out of respect to all our speakers. So I'm going to start in the order that we began with the panelists, and ask Avi Gordon, then Mark, Sima, Ken, Steve, and Dov, in that order to address something that everyone can take home and do today.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for still being here. It's simple for our perspective what you can do. If you go on our website, campusfairness.org, you can sign up, you can get our newsletters, you can be part and be heard under all of our chapters, you can be a part of our chapter, you can be a leader within the chapter, and we welcome all of you to not only sign up yourself, but to invite your network, your friends, fellow alumni to sign up as well, and to have your voice heard.
Although I spoke about the definition of anti-Semitism, I'm going to change tact a little bit. And what I'm going to suggest is that everyone here has a voice in our political process. And what you need to do is be connected to our political leaders. I'm not sure if you're aware, for example, just last week, they announced the formation in the U.S. Senate of a task force against anti-Semitism, bipartisan, headed by two senators, one from Nevada, Jackie Rosen, Democrat, and Jim Lankford from Oklahoma. They need to hear that this is an issue that you are involved with and you care about. They need to know when budgeting concerns come up about the offices in the State Department or Department of Education that deal with these issues, that you want those adequately funded. And most of all, I'm going to say something that I've been saying for a long time now, and I think it's crucial. If you are serious, and by the way, this is something Natan Sharansky has also said, if you are serious about fighting anti-Semitism, including anti-Zionism, you don't begin by pointing fingers at the other person's party. You begin by looking at your own party. Democrats need to call out Democrats, Republicans need to call out Republicans. Otherwise, you're just engaging in cheap political tricks, and you won't succeed with anything.
I will be very short. I will divide my answer into three levels.
Can you hear? Or there's a microphone on the table, or you can come up here also.
Can you hear me? I will divide my answer into three. To the lay leaders of the Jewish people, I would say, unite, leave misconception and ego issue aside, and work together. This is your duty at this time. To the NGOs, the organizations themselves, I would say, go to the offense, each one in his own. By change. You can't hear me? Okay.
You can come here.
For the camera, for the camera. That's for the camera.
We'll come here to the come here. Come here to the come here.
Very emotional bunch.
I would divide my answer into 3 levels. To the lay leaders, I would say, unite, leave misconceptions aside, leave ego issue aside, just start working together, try to formulate a strategy together for the Jewish people because it's your duty. You also have the budget to make things happen. To the NGOs, each one in its own domain and its own specific expertise, I would say change the perception from defense and containment to offense and proactivity. You don't have to use the word offense. I like to use it because it just makes you look at reality in a way, but go proactivity. And for all of you, just join whatever organizations or initiatives that you are feeling aligned to and make a difference in the small area that you can do it. And the more synergy we can create inside of ourselves, I think the more stronger we will be.
Rabbi. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So I'll just go back to something that I mentioned in my presentation. Think about neighbors, friends, contacts who either deal in the progressive world or have some of the critiques of Israel that I mentioned and supply them with materials. I brought copies of the booklet that I mentioned, the Progressive Answers to the Far Left's Critique of Israel. We also have a website, thirdnarrative.org. The notion of a third narrative is one that can embrace both the Zionist narrative and the Palestinian narrative. It's a way to engage with people because you say, yes, there's multiple narratives. Accept ours. We'll discuss yours. We'll find a middle path. So thirdnarrative.org, and you're welcome to one of the booklets.
I think that HaTorah, we have an incredible website, Aish.com, get about 1 million people a month. We have a lot of articles about anti-Semitism, recommend to read, etc. But the truth is, if you want to do something, we partnered with Combat AntiSemitism.org. Sasha's right there, started by an incredible Jew named Adam Barron in Wichita, Kansas. They have quickly become just an incredible organization. One of the things that they've done with this issue that I talked about with young people, they started a series of contests where they're giving away serious dollars, which is incentive for a young person to really do some work on anti-Semitism. So I would definitely, I think the sign the pledge cards are on your table. I can just say that HaTorah as a whole, we've been partnering with them, and I think they're terrific. And the other piece is when you see in the news that Jewish organizations are getting attacked, like I mentioned with Birthright or other organizations, I think you need to stand up. It really doesn't matter if you're a member of the organization, you love them, this, that, hate them, whatever it is. If they're getting attacked for standing up for Israel, then you have to rally to their side.
So I just want to give people an opportunity that the website that you can go to get involved, and also watch the things that we have done on social media, getting millions and millions of hits all over the country from Jews and non-Jews. And by the way, our support comes from Jews and non-Jews all over the United States. So it's AmericansAA.org, that simple. Number 2, sometimes we have a tendency, because the problem is so overwhelming, that a lot of people take the attitude, what can I do to really make a difference? I'm just an individual, what can I do? Even if I get together with 2 or 3 people. I just want to tell everyone, you should not be concerned about that. Everyone needs to do what they can. Some people can do more because of their position. Some people can only support an organization because they're doing things that you care about. One of the things that I think is extremely important that, of course, is not being done, there's too much PC going on, even within Jewish organizations. Look, I don't want to start at this particular. You can watch the things I do, and we're very blunt and very straightforward about things. I'm not loyal to anyone. I'm loyal to the United States of America, and I'm loyal to the Jewish people. That is all I care about. So it is important. If you're part of a synagogue, go to your rabbi. Rabbi, what are we going to do? We've got a very serious problem. You're part of a synagogue that may have 100 members, 200, 500. We need to push our leadership. And with the exception of all the people that are here, our leadership is MIA, basically. It's also because they're not sure what to do. Isn't that incredible? They are not quite sure what to do. What should be the approach? Everybody knows the problem. I mean, we have a man running for the United States, for the presidency, that advocated 2 weeks ago that the aid that goes for Israel's security, that some of it should be sent to Gaza. I don't know if he was going to go to Gaza to hand it out on the streets or give it to Hamas. I'm not quite sure. But the chutzpah, the audacity, there wasn't enough reaction to that. That is the most, you're talking about someone running for the presidency, a serious candidate of a major party in this country, advocating that money for the defense of Israel go to our enemies. We need to, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know where this is going, nor do you. I don't know what the future is. No guarantees. I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if we had raised the issue, can anything happen in this country, God forbid, like happened many years ago in Germany? I think if that would have been raised, people would have thrown you out of the room. Today, no one says that anymore in terms of people are worried. 13 Jews have been murdered in their synagogues. Anti-Semitism here in New York is out of control. You know, when a mother walking with her child gets egged, that affects that person's life for a very long time, possibly forever. And there's been very little response on the part of the city of New York. There's no plan. There's no plot. There's nothing being planned. How are we going to deal with this? So you are the leaders of the Jewish people. Take charge. Thank you.
So based on a lot of questions that were submitted, I'm trying to combine and group some together. Otherwise, we'd be here all day, and everyone has many things to do and go out and take action rather than just sitting here. So let me address one to the and as a parent of someone going into college who's in a gap year in Israel and high school students. A couple of questions have been raised about this college campus. There's been much discussion about what to do on college campuses on anti-Zionism. College campuses are too late. What is being done to educate high school students, their families, and high school teachers with the ability to address this issue when they get to campus? So, who wants to start on that? Anyone want to take a... The question is about what do you suggest to be done to address this issue among high school students and their families and teachers so that students are armed with the information before they get to campus, not once they arrive on campus. General Gill and then Avi. Feel free to come to the microphone if you need.
The campuses are a hub that we need to address. We are addressing it. When I say we, I mean the whole pro-Israel or pro-network. The work which is being done by a group called ICC, Israel on Campus Coalition, together with 19 other initiatives who work on campus organization, is wonderful. And when it comes to school kids, we have detected the fact that they are coming from a greenhouse into this academy sphere, and then for the first time they are meeting these challenges. So what we have done, back in the ministry, by the way, with Jaffe, is that we have taken shlichim and sent them to schools and actually educated them on Israeli issues, on Zionist issues, on anti-Semitism, and what is it they're going to encounter. And I know for sure that it wasn't just one initiative that we have come up with. I know for a fact that many organizations are doing this, and I think it's very important because you prepare them for campus life. But when we're talking about campuses, we should work very hard in faculty level, because the problem starts there, not with kids, not with SJPs. They are crazy as they are, but the problem is the faculty who actually brainwash those kids.
Starts with divesting all money from every school that participates in it. Yes. You squeeze them with money.
Okay, where?
You said that.
We're going to try to finish the program in around by 2 o'clock as was announced, so please continue.
I agree with everything you said. We're a part of the Israel on Campus Coalition. It's an important coalition. And likewise, there's an organization, the Academic Engagement Network, amongst others who work with faculty. Additionally, I want to say that I do know that Stand With Us, one of the organizations, has a very robust, for about 8 years now, high school program. Absolutely, it's worth an applaud because their work is tremendous. Stand With Us also has Israel Link, which is a middle school program. So they're working with middle school, high school, college students all at once. And it's pretty amazing to see their trajectory of these student activists making a difference in their high school, in their local public high schools, many of them, by the way, not just private schools, and then also going to colleges and being those stand-up activists and leaders. Stand With Us. It's Stand With Us. StandWithUs.com is the website.
Before I went to HaTorah, I actually worked with NCSY for 22 years with this age group. And one of the things that we did was we created something called JSU, Jewish Student Union. It's jsu.org. We started hundreds and hundreds of public school clubs where we would bring in IDF officer, people that served in the IDF, to go straight to the kids and talk to them before they got to campus. So I would recommend, I'm not there anymore, but they're terrific folks. JSU.org. I would definitely. They have a lot of curriculum and they have a really broad reach all over North America.
I just want to explain that I'm talking about something very different from IDF guy coming into a university, to a high school. That's all wonderful. Kids get turned on, especially the guys in uniform. That's all very nice. I'm talking about something else. There's no simple way to become educated about Israel. It takes time. It takes work, hard work. It takes a lot of reading. It takes extensive involvement. And that's what I'm talking about. And it can start. There's got to be a program. Someone has to be, let's be honest, pay for it. High schools, good high schools, kids are busy already. They are very busy competing to go to good colleges. So there has to be a program coming from the top. For all the Jewish organizations, I'm sure they can cough up some real money to encourage kids at all the top high schools, all the top schools in New York and beyond to get involved and have a curriculum where they cover everything. It's not simple. I've been reading all my life and I'm still learning. So the point is, that's what I'm talking about. It can start in high school, that's great. But God forbid that we should give up at the college level. We need to find those students. By the way, those that are involved against Israel, they're not a very large group. They just make a lot of noise. We have universities all over New York where you have 15, 20, 25% of the student body is Jewish. You have tens of thousands of students at these universities. We just got to find the kids who can be leaders. They can, you're a freshman, you got 4 more years coming. These kids have to be trained, and not every kid. I mean, being educated is great, but you need leaders, and it would make such a difference. By the way, Israel is not perfect, nor none of us are perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. We all do things that maybe we could have done better. But Israel, they're the good guys. They really are. We have justice on our side. Israel is threatened. Look what just happened in the last few weeks. Our enemies send missiles into populated areas to murder men, women, and children. And still, in spite of that, some of the candidates on the Democratic side still cannot find the words. They're still looking for the words to express their outrage at the terror that's coming from Gaza. They always have a problem. And that's part of the problem. It's the legitimization of hate, the legitimization of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. We got a lot of work to do.
Anyone else want to comment on the question?
Cede my time.
No, what? You cede your time?
Cede my time.
Okay. So I do.
I'll take the next question.
I think we are at 2 o'clock, and therefore, since we promised a program from 12 to 2, we are going to stop here in keeping with trying to respect people's times. I know many of our speakers are, I think, will be around and can answer questions informally. Don't leave yet. Hold on. Wait. Francine Stein, our board chair, will conclude. We will, as we've done before, sing HaTikva and the Star Spangled Banner as we do at our Zionist programs. I do want to mention one other thing that's been pointed out by a few people, the Never Again Education Act, which is something that Hadassah is spearheading. Many organizations, AZM has endorsed it as well, which is a broad, bipartisan congressional legislation dealing with the general issue of anti-Semitism that people should take a look at, and something that you should become aware of as well. So we'll conclude with Francine Stein, our board chair. Thank you.
I just want to take this opportunity once again to thank Yaakov Hagoel and the WZO and all the WZO partners for their inspiration and their incentives and working on this worldwide problem. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank all our speakers for their insights and for their suggestions. As you know, this is a very difficult problem. We're not going to solve it all today. We have some suggestions that we can go home and do and work on, but there's always room for more. So we invite you to continue working on anti-Semitism, and with that, I'm going to call on Solomon Bastias to lead us in the anthems.
Please rise. Oh, say, can you get well home.